Modeling from Weighted Addition to Multiplicative Interaction Part 2, number 1726, July 23, 2026, Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation, Category, Biomathematics. Weighted Addition versus Multiplication, two different mathematical philosophies. The preceding discussion extends beyond the Framingham model itself and reflects two fundamentally different mathematical approaches to disease modeling. Weighted addition model traditional cardiovascular risk models. Estimate total risk by assigning a weighted contribution to each independent risk factor and then summing these contributions. Conceptually, overall risk approximately equals A plus B plus C plus D plus, where each variable contributes independently according to its statistical weight. This framework has been highly successful for large population statistical studies because of its simplicity, interpretability, and statistical robustness. However, statistical findings derived from large populations may not fully explain the complexity of an individual patient's disease. Population-based models identify average trends and probabilities, whereas each patient represents a unique biomedical system with multiple interacting pathophysiological factors that may not be completely captured by simple statistical averaging alone. Multiplication interaction-based model. An alternative mathematical philosophy assumes that pathophysiological variables continuously interact with one another, instead of treating glucose, blood pressure, pulse pressure, inflammation, and other biomedical variables as independent contributors. The model assumes that each variable modifies the influence of the others. This interaction-based framework is conceptually closer to what is actually occurring inside the human body, where pathophysiological systems continuously influence and respond to one another rather than operating independently. Conceptually, overall risk approximately equals A times B times C times D times. Under this framework, one abnormal physiological variable can magnify the pathophysiological effects of another. For example, elevated glucose may weaken vascular tissue, while elevated blood pressure simultaneously increases mechanical stress on that weakened tissue. Their combined effect may therefore exceed the simple arithmetic addition of two independent risk factors. My recent stroke on June 21, 2025 provided a striking example of this concept. The interaction among glucose, systolic blood pressure SBP, and pulse pressure PP equals SBP dBP was more effectively represented by a multiplicative framework, illustrating how multiple interacting biomedical variables may collectively contribute to stroke risk beyond their individual effects. This interaction-based reality and philosophy attempts to represent the coupled nature of biomedical systems more realistically. Engineering interpretation. From an engineering viewpoint, weighted addition models resemble the superposition of independent loads acting on a SY stem. In contrast, multiplication models resemble interaction terms frequently encountered in nonlinear mechanics, dynamic system, fatigue, viscoplasticity, fracture mechanics, material instability, fluid dynamics, and coupled multiphysics systems, where stress, strain, temperature, material properties, thermal and loading conditions influence one another simultaneously. More than 60% of my written medical research papers have applied the viscoplastic medicine theory VMT, which is based on a multiplicative mathematical framework. In this model, viscoplastic energy is represented through the interaction between output strain and multiple input stressors, rather than by the simple arithmetic addition of their individual effects. Stress-strain energy is the result of the interactions between the time-dependent output strain and multiple input stressors. This engineering concept naturally extends to biomedical systems. Similarly, biomedical systems rarely behave as collections of isolated variables. Instead, they function as tightly coupled pathophysiological networks in which metabolic, hemodynamic, inflammatory, neural, and structural processes continuously interact. For this reason, an interaction-based multiplicative framework may better represent the progressive amplification observed during the development of many chronic disorders and their induced mortality or related diseases, including cardiovascular disease. Discussion. The objective of this paper is not to argue that the Framingham model is incorrect. Rather, it is to examine whether weighted addition and multiplication represent two fundamentally different mathematical philosophies for modeling complex biomedical systems. The Framingham model has made historic contributions to preventive cardiology and remains one of the most influential cardiovascular risk models ever developed. Similarly, my earlier approximately 50 research papers on CVD and CKD were also based on a weighted additive model. It was not until I verified that their predicted results consistently fell near the lower end of my own pathophysiological records that I shifted toward a multiplicative model. Nevertheless, the published literature has demonstrated that, under certain clinical conditions, weighted additive models may underestimate the observed cardiovascular risk. From an engineering perspective, these observations naturally raise the question of whether interaction-based multiplicative models may better represent the coupled behavior of biological systems. This conceptual comparison also provides the mathematical motivation behind my recently developed triggering sensitivity index for stroke risk TSI stroke model, which was derived using a multiplicative framework. Conclusion: the purpose of this paper is not to replace existing cardiovascular risk models, but to encourage broader discussion regarding the mathematical architecture used to represent chronic disease progression. Traditional weighted additive models, including the Framingham model, have made historic contributions to preventive cardiology and remain valuable clinical tools. My objective is simply to explore whether interaction-based multiplicative models may better represent the complex coupling among pathophysiological stressors observed in living biomedical systems. To me, when I'm managing severe mortality disease risks, mathematical modeling becomes more than a theoretical exercise, it becomes a matter of survival. Ultimately, the value of any biomedical model depends on whether it faithfully reflects physical reality and correctly identifies whether the biomedical system is improving or deteriorating. Rather than viewing weighted addition and multiplication as competing approaches, they may represent complementary mathematical frameworks suited to different biologic. I hope this paper encourages further investigation into interaction-based mathematical models for chronic disease research. My conclusive argument can be summarized in one sentence: the mathematical architecture should reflect the physics of interacting biomedical processes. Epilogue: looking back, I realized that this interaction-based mathematical philosophy did not begin with the TSI stroke model in March of 2026. For past 6 years, my viscoplastic medicine theory VMT has already represented disease progression through the viscoplastic energy which comes from the interaction between output strain and multiple input stressors. Only recently did I recognize that this VMT framework is fundamentally multiplicative in nature. This realization helped me understand why many of my engineering-inspired biomedical models share a common mathematical foundation. Despite having been developed years apart and for different diseases, appendix, viscoplastic energy and multiplicative interaction sapling continuum mechanics and viscoplasticity to human pathophysiology provides a framework for understanding how chronic microdamage accumulates in human tissues, especially vascular vessels. In this model, viscoplastic energy results from the interaction between stress and strain rather than from the simple addition of their individual effects. Mathematically, this energy is represented by the area on the stress-strain curve, expressed as the integral of stress with respect to strain integral sigma d epsilon. From an engineering perspective, biomedical damage depends not only on the magnitude of lifestyles or pathophysiological stressors, but also on their duration, repetition, and interaction. Elevated glucose, increased blood pressure, vascular inflammation, and other metabolic abnormalities act simultaneously on living tissues, producing cumulative viscoplastic deformation over time. Reducing these interacting stressors through lifestyle intervention decrease the accumulated viscoplastic energy and may slow long-term microvascular and macrovascular damage. This engineering perspective also explains why interaction-based mathematical models may better represent chronic disease progression than purely additive approaches. If the underlying physical process is multiplicative, applying logarithmic or statistical transformations to its surface cannot change that fundamental interaction. This multiplicative viscoplastic energy concept is illustrated in the following video. Viscoplastopology analysis of diabetes transition. So, YouTube.com watch V equals KBW9 megpa. Finally, every mathematical model is built upon the 4 basic arithmetic operations in engineering. However, the fundamental physical laws are almost always based on interactions represented by multiplication rather than simple addition. Examples include Newton's second law: F equals m times a, work W equals F times d, power P equals F times V or V times I, stress strain energy, momentum P equals m times V, kinetic energy mv, gravitational force, electrostatic force, and Hooke's law: F equals K times X. These physics examples reinforce the central theme of my many medical research papers: physical interactions are fundamentally multiplicative. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C.